Okay, so in this video I'm going to briefly go over some of the ways that you can clean up motion capture data in Maya. Now here I have some motion capture data of a dancer, and I've already binded it to the skin of this character, and you can do that by going up to the rigging section of Maya, and you can bring out the human IK for the skeleton. And you can basically just bind the skin. You can create like a little skeleton and bind it to the motion capture data that you have. So I didn't do anything fancy. I could have weight painted it probably a bit better, but for now it's good enough. So if we look through this data for a little bit, there's a lot of jittering, especially in the legs. Motion capture systems especially do not handle feet and legs very well. There's some jittering in other places too, like the chest and the hips right there, but feet are especially bad. So what can we do to solve that? The first thing we can do is we can just go back to the human IK system. So pull that back up, and we can actually pin the feet, and by doing that we can create these auxiliary effectors, which are like boxes, and they essentially give pull on the feet. So if I were to get rid of that for a second while we watch it in place, we can see the feet kind of jitter even though she's just standing still in this thing. So if I add an auxiliary effector, and let's turn it off. Actually, no, let's turn it back on for now. We can key the influence from the auxiliary effector so that the data is more stable. So what we can do here is that, and then now if we scrub through, it's not moving at all like what it was before. Like if I were to break the connections back to what it was, you can see it's jittering. So you can do that by essentially you can make the feet stable by essentially just whenever the feet touches the ground or comes close to touching the ground, like right here for example, you can create an auxiliary effector in that position. And so whenever it gets close to touching the ground, you can start to keyframe the influence. So this would start at 0 influence as the foot is coming into place, and then when it starts to get to a place that you want on the ground, you can key it up. And then you can do the reverse for the actual motion capture data. It comes in at 100%, and then as it gets close, it drops down to 0%. And so as you can see, if it goes out of the range, it's wonky. So you want to kind of be careful of when to change the influence between the actual data and the effectors. But that's a really easy way of kind of stabilizing the feet and also stabilizing the legs to a certain extent. But that doesn't work always for everything else. So let's go to a point where there's a non-feet issue. Okay, so I found a spot, and if we look at the left shoulder here, as it's coming in, for a little bit it twists and it pops back out afterwards, but we don't want that twist. Something's wrong here. And if we're looking at the joints specifically, it looks like it's pretty clear that it is this joint that's causing some sort of rotational issue. In some cases, especially in the chest area, it can be hard to determine what joint is causing the jitter. It could be like this spine joint, or this spine joint, or this spine joint, or a combination of all three. But in this case, it's pretty clear. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into Windows Animation Editor, Graph Editor, and we're going to see what this looks like. So if we zoom in, let's just, we're not actually highlighted on the right thing. First, click on that, and then if we zoom in, we can see that for some reason this is up here. All of these other wavelengths are pretty in sync in a normal range. Some of them might have random spikes some places, but for the most part it looks pretty natural. And you don't want to just go through and like makes everything smooth out, because that can lose some valuable data. You really only want to edit what you see in the actual animation to be an issue. But here, this is clearly where the issue occurs. And it looks like for some reason the data didn't stay within the range of 360 degrees. So the shoulder is rotating past 360 degrees to get back to a normal frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to just put it back down here. So we're going to highlight everything, and I'm going to look to see, okay, so this first keyframe is about at 350, so we're going to subtract 360. We're going to put this at about -10 degrees. So if I zoom in here, -10's down here, we're going to put that about there. And that, as you can see, is much more in line with everything. But we do have this still. This is still an issue. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start just bringing it down, kind of getting it within that normal range so that there's a more smooth, gradual transition. Whoopsies. Like this one. So we can kind of create a new curve that's more smooth. And let's see what we have now. So if we go back, play it. It doesn't look like it is rotating anymore. Now it caused some issues with the hand, but we'll get to that in a second. But the shoulder itself looks pretty good. And it looks like it came back to a natural place later on because of that 360 shift. So, looks like the shoulder's good, but as we can see, now the hand is jittering, which it didn't before. And so we're going to go to the next one, the elbow in this case, and we're going to look to see what's going on here. We can see some weirdness here. We can see a few spikes here. And so this is a case where there's not really a clear issue. It might be this green one jumping really far up. There's not really a clear issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of smooth everything out a little bit. And I'm going to bring some of this down a little bit. That way it's not as harsh of changes. It's probably actually this red, now that I can see it. But it might not even be the elbow. It might be the wrist itself. So let's see. That's a little better. We have a little bit of a jump still. Just to quickly take a look at the wrist to see what we have. Okay, as you can see, that's pretty solid. The wrist is pretty stable throughout the entire thing. There's some dips and variation, like right here. And if you wanted to, you probably could honestly just pull them in. But these probably aren't going to affect anything. So So it looks like the wrist is mostly good. So it looks like the elbow is the, oops, accidentally got rid of it. The elbow is the cause here. So if we continue pushing it a little bit to a more normal position, maybe bring these down. Just so we don't have as harsh of a curve. Same with this blue, I haven't really been giving that much attention as well. That way it has a few frames to kind of do what it wants to do and make that transition. It's not like a harsh jump. So let's quickly take a look at that. And there's still some jitter there, but it's a lot more stable. And that's what we want. Essentially, I would go back through and put a little bit more time kind of making those smooth curves within the range. But the shoulder looks a lot better now. And at this point, it's just kind of a time-consuming process of seeing where it jitters, finding the root cause, and fixing it. And it's also important to note that when you fix something up the chain, you're gonna need to fix down the chain as well, because even if this is messed up originally, these still had good data. And so when you refix this and change the location for like an FK, that's going to affect the locations of these as well, and that is essentially going to cause like a ripple effect of jitter down the chain. And so it's kind of annoying, but it's probably the most visual way of fixing it. So yeah, that's pretty much it.